Our emotional intelligence, our sensitivity, our awareness, by eating animal foods, it shuts it down. And I remember a little bit later in the summer when we all gathered around a dairy cow. And again, it was the same thing. You know, on any dairy, organic or not, it's always the same story. I own you, I own your baby that's born, I'm going to kill your baby, I'm going to impregnate you again on the rape rack, I'm going to steal your baby, kill your baby. So this is the thing. And so we gathered around this dairy cow. She was only maybe 4 years old, 5 years old at the most is when they're all killed. Again, on any dairy, organic or not, a small backyard operation or a big commercial operation, the animals are all killed at a relatively young age. And so I participated in that. I remember standing and we had a gun and we put it right to the head of the cow and we pulled the trigger, and after 3 tries, she finally crashed to the floor of the barn. And it was, I won't go into it, but it was really shocking to see a 2,000-pound animal reduced to huge amounts of feces and urine and blood. And to see that happening. I remember the following year, it was kind of interesting because the following year we did it again. Because you have to kill these cows. You can't keep feeding them if they're not giving milk. The whole idea is they're just here for us to use. What the guy said was, he said, if we can't get milk money from her, then we'll get meat money, right? That's it. They're just objects to be used. And so that harms not just them, it harms us. It forces us to reduce our fundamental wisdom and compassion and empathy and awareness on such a deep level as a society that we just create, of course we're going to create toxins and war and injustice with each other. How could we not? There's no way we couldn't. And we have to, because this is the most fundamental connection that we have with nature and with each other is our food. So I remember the following year, we didn't want to do it in the barn. So the guy that ran the dairy said, well, just take her up to this little grassy area and do it over there, and it won't make such a mess. And so it was so interesting. We had like 30 or 40 kids on a rope trying to pull this cow, and we couldn't. These animals are aware of what's going on, and she didn't want to be, whatever we were going to do, she didn't want to have anything to do with it. So remember, we couldn't pull her. So we just did what we always do. We just overwhelmed her with superior force, and we got a chain, and we tied it to the back of a four-wheel drive pickup truck, and we just started pulling, and of course she couldn't resist that, so she got pulled up there, and I was riding in the back of the truck, and I remember when we got almost up there, she broke the chain. It snapped, and the truck lurched forward, everybody fell down, and I remember looking back and seeing this cow with this chain hanging off her neck. She wasn't saying anything, obviously, but she was speaking very loudly and very clearly saying, please, don't do this. But I knew there's no option. I mean, these animals are going to be killed. They're going to be sexually abused. They're going to have their babies stolen, and that's it. I mean, we are the ones in power. They have no power. So for me, again, my wound was I was born into a society organized around animal agriculture, and I participated in it by eating it and so forth. Luckily for me, right after college, it was during the Vietnam War era, and I started questioning the war machine, and I started reading books on Eastern religion and meditating and doing yoga, all this stuff back in the early 1970s in Maine, of all places. And right after college, my brother and I decided we would go on the spiritual pilgrimage. We thought we want to find out more about what life is all about. We thought we'd go. The question was like, well, then what do you do? How do you attain cosmic consciousness? That's what we wanted to do. And we thought about it for a while, and then we knew what would actually work. We knew one thing would work. If we wanted to get cosmic consciousness, the way to do that was to go to California. So we thought, we'll walk to California. So we started walking. I remember walking down the driveway of my parents' home with a little backpack, with some fresh baked cookies, and we were headed out, to California. We got as far as Buffalo. After about a month of walking, we walked all the way to Buffalo. That took quite a bit of doing. But when we got to Buffalo, it was October. It was freezing already. So I thought, well, I have a bachelor's degree from a pretty good school. I can figure it out. We better head south. So we actually walked from there down across upstate New York into Pennsylvania, across Pennsylvania into West Virginia, through West Virginia to Kentucky, and then into Tennessee. And then finally to Alabama. We ended up in a Zen center in Alabama, if you can believe it. But on the way, we stopped for a while in a community called the farm. It was in south of Nashville in Summertown, Tennessee. And the farm at that point, in 1975, was the largest hippie commune in the world. It was mostly people from California. They'd come out there, and they had created this big hippie commune. About 900 people were there when we got there, and they were all vegetarians, all 900. In fact, we today would have called them vegans. They would have called themselves vegans, but no one knew the word vegan in 1975, so you couldn't even use it. But basically, they didn't eat any meat or dairy products or eggs. And they did it for ethical reasons. And so there they were, and no one was dragging themselves through the mud, begging us for protein. You know, they were actually doing great. They had about 200 children that were all vegan from birth, and they were all thriving. And so I looked at these people, and they were really very inspiring to me because they were living close to the earth. They had a pretty organized spiritual life in the sense that they were committed to helping to create a better world by growing food that was healthy and organic and giving birth to their own kids and a lot of really beautiful things. So I said, why are you guys vegetarians? You know, how does that all fit? And the guy I was talking to, he said, well, there's two reasons primarily. Number one, most of the food we're growing, we're feeding to imprisoned animals while people are starving. So it's well understood that food shortages are unnecessary. We're feeding enough food. I mean, I know today, right now, we're growing enough food to feed at least 12 billion people. Very conservatively, you have about 7.5 billion people. How is it possible, if we're growing enough food to feed 12 billion people, we only have 7.5 billion, that we have almost 1 billion of our brothers and sisters chronically hungry and starving? It's very easy. With most of the food we're growing, we're feeding to imprisoned cows, pigs, chickens, factory farm fishes eat huge amounts of grain also. And so what they were telling me was that the food shortages are unnecessary, and they're the primary driving cause behind global conflict. So they say we're eating lower on the food chain so there's enough for everyone to eat so we can have peace in the world, because we can never have peace without justice. To really understand that, you know, and there's a fundamental injustice. Anyone who's eating any animal foods, any meat, dairy products, or eggs is directly harming other living beings. Like Thich Nhat Hanh says, anyone who eats meat is eating the flesh of starving children, because essentially these kids families are forced off their land in order to grow genetically engineered corn and soy in countries all over the world that is then made into meat and dairy products that are shipped to the wealthy to eat. So when you have a situation where the rich people are taking most of the land, most of the water, most of the petroleum, and creating most of the pollution and eating basically high off the hog, while other people not far away are literally starving. The mothers have their kids starving in their arms, and it's completely unnecessary. Animal agriculture is the most violent form of living towards animals, towards ecosystems, towards other human beings you could possibly imagine. So I got a little glimpse of that from these people, just explaining to me that we could feed everyone if people would eat a plant-based diet, easily. That's the good news. This earth, how many of you have noticed by now that the earth is beautiful? Anybody? No, the earth is so beautiful. And this beauty, I think just seeing the beauty, I'm so fortunate since the World Peace Diet has been translated now into all these languages. I've been giving lectures on this topic in over 50 countries. We've been all over Africa, Asia, Eastern, Western Europe, North and South America. And there's so much beauty in forests and rivers and oceans. And I think when we see that beauty of the animals and of ecosystems, it awakens something in us, hopefully, to protect this beautiful planet for the animals and for ourselves and for our children. But not only is the earth beautiful, the earth is abundant.